Can I put a couple for there? Can you swear? Hey, John.
It is 6.
Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, April 14th, 2022, and I'd like to call the Winnebago County Board meeting to order. Tonight's invocation and pledge of allegiance is going to be given by Board Member Joe Hoffman. Everyone, please stand.
Thank you, dear Lord, for all the blessings and all the things you give us. Please help the people of Ukraine and stop that silly war. Thank you for all the goods that you give us. Thank you for all the blessings. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Thompson, are there any agenda announcements this evening?
None this evening, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Clerk Gummow, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mrs. Crosby. Here. Ms. Fellers. Here. Mr. Gurl.
Present.
Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Hoffman. Present. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Lindmark. Present. Mr. McCarthy. Present. Mr. McDonald.
Present.
Mr. Neighbors. Here. Mrs. Red. Here. Mr. Salgado.
Present.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Tassoni.
Present.
Mr. Webster. Here. Mr. Westcott.
Present.
Mr. Arena.
Here.
Mr. Booker.
Present.
Mr. Butita.
Here.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, that's 20 board members present.
Very good. We have a quorum this evening. Okay, we'll move on to awards, presentations, public hearings, and public participation. There are no awards presentation this evening, no public hearings this evening. And we do have 2 speakers who have signed up. Are the speakers present this evening? Mr. Reverend Earl Dotson Sr.
That's got to be how many times?
Okay, and we have also Nancy Edwardson. Neither are here. Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on to proclamations. Okay. So this evening we have 3 proclamations. Our first proclamation is going to be given to the Honorable Jennifer Clifford. If you would like to come up with whoever you have with you, your guest. Judge Clifford is the chair of the 17th Judicial Circuit Family Violence Coordinating Council. Welcome. Okay, tonight's proclamation is in recognition of Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. Whereas throughout the month of April, the Family Violence Coordinating Council and other prevention groups will be hosting several events to bring awareness to the issue of child abuse. And whereas child abuse and neglect is a complex and ongoing problem in our society, affecting many children in Winnebago County. And whereas over 200,000 calls to the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services are made each year, and last year, 146,125 child victims were associated with abuse and neglect investigations. And whereas every child is entitled to be loved, cared for, nurtured, feel secure, and be free from verbal, sexual, emotional, and physical abuse and neglect. And whereas the County of Winnebago has dedicated individuals and organizations who work daily to counter the problem of child abuse and neglect and to help parents obtain the assistance they need. And whereas our communities are stronger when all citizens become aware of child abuse and neglect prevention and become involved in supporting parents to raise their children in a safe and nurturing environment. And whereas effective child abuse prevention programs succeed because of the partnerships among families, social service agencies, schools, religious and civic organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Joseph V. Shirelli, Chairman of the Winnebago County Board, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month in Winnebago County and encourage all citizens to rally support for child abuse victims and to volunteer with organizations pledging to end this crime that plagues not only our fair county, but also society at large. Thank you. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
I'm here joined by Kathy Pomahawk, who's the Executive Director of the Carrie Lynn Children's Center. The first thing I just want to say today is how much I appreciate Chairman Chiarelli and the entire County Board, not just for their time today and for this wonderful proclamation, but also the County Board's dedication to the prevention of child abuse and neglect. This county supports so many agencies that fight against child abuse and neglect, including the court system as a whole, the state's attorney's office, the public defender's office, Children's Safe Harbor, the Carrie Lynn Children's Center, and the court-appointed Special Advocate Program, CASA, amongst others. We are so lucky in this county to have so much support from so many organizations and people in this fight. As Chairman Chiarelli said, I'm the chair of the 17th Judicial Circuit Family Violence Coordinating Council, and I'm a judge in the Intimate Partner Criminal Domestic Violence Courtroom. But prior to that, I was a prosecutor for 20 years in this county, mainly prosecuting cases of child abuse and neglect. I know firsthand the dedication and hard work of those that work at the Carrie Lynn Children's Center. It is not easy to hear reports of horrific abuse and neglect day in and day out, but these amazing people do it. They do it because they believe we can end child abuse and neglect. They do it because in every child they see somebody that is worth fighting for. They do it because these children inspire them with their bravery, strength, and resilience. They do it because all children matter and deserve to live and grow up with safety, hope, and love. Thank you to everyone who works to help the most innocent and vulnerable in our community. Thank you to Kathy Pomahawk and your amazing staff at the Carrie Lynn Children's Center that I have had the honor of working with for years. Our community is safer because of your hard work, dedication, and commitment. I cannot thank the County Board enough for your ongoing support to help us in this fight. And finally, I just want to ask you to join us. I know Chairman Chiarelli will be there as well. On Thursday, April 21st at noon, outside of the Criminal Justice Center, we will be recognizing and supporting survivors of child abuse and neglect at Hands Around the Courthouse. Thank you so much for your time and support. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Judge Clifford. Our next proclamation is presented to Chief Deputy Rick Saganek from the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. Please come forward. Tonight's proclamation is in recognition of National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, April 10th, 2022 through April 16, 2022. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. And whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response from police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical services is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical services is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Winnebago County Emergency 911 Communications Center. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and foremost critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical services by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of Winnebago County have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in their past year. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Joseph V. Shirelli, as Chairman of Winnebago County and the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, recognize the week of April 10, 2022 through April 16, 2022 to be National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Winnebago County, in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep the county and our citizens safe.
Thank you. Sorry, if I call up the...
Absolutely.
Janine, would you like to come up? I'd like to have the director of the 911 Center come up. I'd like to give this to her. First, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing this in the county board. Our telecommunicators have been through a tremendous amount over the last 6 or 8 months. A lot of diversity in the 911 Center, and they've answered the call, and they've done an outstanding job. And a lot of that is due to the leadership of Janine Kaplan over here. She came on board about a year ago, and she's done a knockout job at the 911 Center. As many of you know, the telecommunicators are the first to receive calls when people are in distress, when they're in crisis. They talk people through their emergencies until they can hand them off to firefighters, to police officers, to whatever they need to resolve their crisis. And a lot of times, the telecommunicators don't get to hear the outcome of the call, because by the time they've passed them on to the person responding, they're on to another crisis, another emergency. And so it's a very difficult job, done under very difficult circumstances, and we greatly appreciate what they do. I would like to give the proclamation to Janine, who is leading the 911 Center and doing an outstanding job. Janine.
Just want to say thank you guys for your constant support. Our telecommunicators are amazing men and women in this community, that they live in this community. So when we say that we have the best of the best, we truly do, because we're also serving their families, their loved ones, their friends as well. So we just want to continue your support and appreciate your support that you guys give us every day. Thank you.
Okay, our next proclamation is going to be presented to Regina Taylor from the Winnebago County Health Department Refugee Program. Come forward. Shireen Boyd from the Winnebago County Health Department Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Visiting. And Jaleesa Bondurant, Executive Director of Children's Safe Harbor and Winnebago County Action Team. I hope I got your name correct. All right, this proclamation is in recognition of Black Maternal Health Week, April 11th through the 17th, 2022, raising awareness of the issues of maternal and infant health in Winnebago County, Illinois. Whereas the overall health, resiliency, sustainability, and progress of a thriving, vibrant community is dependent on the health of the future generation of children and families. Whereas the Winnebago County community identified maternal and child health as a priority in the Community Health Assessment, Community Health Improvement Plan. Whereas the overall infant mortality rate for Winnebago County is 1.3 times higher than the state of Illinois, with disproportionate impacts on Black African American infants at 2.6 times higher than the rate of white infants. And whereas low birth weight and preterm births contribute to infant morbidity and mortality. And whereas perinatal depression and mental health concerns, including substance use disorders, impact pregnant women and their families. And whereas Black African women are 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related conditions and more likely to die from pregnancy-related medical condition as white women in Illinois. And whereas access to early and ongoing culturally competent prenatal care reduces the risk of infant and maternal mortality and morbidity. And whereas implicit bias contributes to stigmatizing behavior and health equity concerns for pregnant women of color. And whereas pregnant women and their concerns are not always heard by the providers, promoting the Centers for Disease Control prompting the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to launch the Hear Her Concerns campaign to educate healthcare providers to engage in active listening to eliminate preventable maternity mortality. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Joseph V. Chiarelli, Chairman of the Winnebago County Board, do hereby proclaim the week of April 11th through the 17th to be Black Maternal Health Week, and urge all of the community, including individual residents and entities such as businesses, faith-based organizations, educational systems, healthcare providers and their systems, support agencies, and governmental entities to value and support pregnant women of color and their families for their future. Invest in programming and services, including early childhood education and home visits. Remove barriers to services, including financial, language, and cultural, and support the Hear Her Concerns campaign.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Shireen Boyd. I serve as a program manager for the I Grow Home Visiting Program, where we facilitate and coordinate home visiting services for children and families. So on behalf of Winnebago County Health Department, I would like to accept the proclamation and thank the County Board, County Chairman, and also the community for bringing the issue of maternal and infant health in Winnebago County to the forefront. This is an issue that not only affects our community, but actually cities across the country. By recognizing Black Maternal Health Week, we as a community can acknowledge the higher infant death rate in our community than in the state, the disproportionate impact infant death rates has on Black African American infants, that Black African American women are 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related conditions and are more likely to die from pregnancy-related medical conditions as white women in Illinois. During this week, Winnebago County Health Department, along with our other partners, are working to share CDC's Hear Her campaign and urgent maternal warning signs. Knowing these signs and acting quickly can keep those who are pregnant or had a baby up to 1 year alive. We would especially like to recognize all the partners and groups here today that are represented to show how important the issue of maternal and infant health is to our community. Your support, their support, is what can really make the difference in finding us solutions here in Winnebago County.
Behind this podium, they're seeing me on my tiptoes. It's a great time. I do want to thank the board. Oh, there we go. Well, there we go. That's a little less embarrassing. There we go. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman Shirelli. Thank you, County Board. We are only as strong as our most vulnerable community. So by you making this proclamation today, you are valuing women in our community and honoring their health. Thank you. The stats are astonishing. It's 1 in 5 days, one woman every 5 days dies related to pregnancy or childbirth. And those rates for our community should not be acceptable. One of the things that the County Health Department, in partnership with the Winnebago Action Team, will be doing is we'll be kicking off a monthly series where we will be going through a data walk starting April 28th. We will be doing a data walk to address these concerns, and each month after that we will be looking at, I am not even reading any of my notes at this point. We're gonna go back, yes. Let me go back. We invite you on April 28th at 12:30 to watch live as we do a data walk, identify supports, and kick off the community conversation addressing these concerns. The Winnebago County Action Team, in partnership with the Winnebago County Health Department, aim to reduce these numbers, hear from the community, and inform our health systems. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I was so nervous to tell you guys on how we plan on tackling this, because we don't want to just proclaim this as a week, but we want to do the work needed to reduce these numbers. I forgot to introduce myself. Thank you, Ms. Cheryl. I am Jaleesa Bondurant. I'm the Executive Director of Children's Safe Harbor. I also sit on the Winnebago County Action Team, which is part of DCFS's Permanency Enhancement Project to reduce children in care and fight child abuse. So thank you. That is me.
All right, we will move on to our agenda items. Number 6 is the approval of minutes. May I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 10th, 2022, and layover of the March 24th, 22 minutes. Ms. Red and Mr. Girls seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to that motion? Very good. Clerk, please pass everyone present. Thank you. Next, we have the consent agenda. We have the raffle report and the auditor's report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Mr. Westcott approves, and Mr. McCarthy seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, clerk, can you please cast a yes for all members present? Move on to appointments. There are several appointments this evening. And by county board rules, the board chairman appointments require a 30-day layover unless there is suspension of rules. The first is a Four Rivers Sanitation Authority. The compensation is $6,000 per year. Mr. Elmer Jones is being put up for reappointment. The second is Harlem and Roscoe Fire District Board. Their compensation is not to exceed $1,500 per year. That is Mr. Bart Munger. It's a reappointment. The next is Otter Creek Lake Utility District. There is no compensation, and that's Mr. Ronald Waldschmidt, and that is a reappointment. Next is the North Park Water District. Compensation is $1,200 per year, and Ms. Carol Lamb is the applicant who I'm reappointing for that position. The next is New Milford Fire Protection District. Compensation not to exceed $1,000 per year. And the reappointment is for Julie Dodd. Next is the Northwest Fire Protection District. The compensation is not to exceed $1,000 per year. The appointment is for a reappointment for Mr. Gregory Gill. The next is Durand Sanitary District. The compensation is none, and that is for Mr. David Bliss. That is also a reappointment. The next is the Board of Review. The compensation is $27,809.86, and that's for Mr. Thomas Ewing. That is a reappointment. We'll move on now to the reports of standing committees. The first is the Finance Committee. Mr. Salgado. You can come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has 4 items today. The first one is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2023 budget policy, and I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Salgado and a second by Mr. Hoffman. Any discussion, Mr. Salgado?
No, this is just standard procedure before we start the budget process. It's pretty standard. It just gives the language on the different things for departments, how to recognize revenue, et cetera, expenses, and so forth.
Very good. Is there any board member discussion? Very good. Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this motion to approve? Very good. Clerk, can you please cast every member present a yes? Next, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a resolution awarding the purchase of patrol vehicles related equipment 2022 ARP money, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Salgado, second by Mr. Gurl. Any discussion, Mr. Salgado?
Yes, just real quick. This is the sheriff's vehicles, part of it, and it's in the amount of $990,580.
Very good. Any board member discussion? Very good. Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this motion to approve? Very good. Clerk, please cast the yes vote for all members present. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a resolution to purchase capital assets module for Munis Enterprise Resource Planning, ERP 2022 ARP money, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Salgado, seconded by Mr. Arena. Mr. Salgado, any discussion?
Yeah, just real quickly, this is just a Munis module that's being purchased in the amount of $82,880. It's for the management of capital assets.
Very good. Is there any board member discussion? Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this motion to approve? Okay, hearing and seeing none, please cast a yes for all members present. Number 5, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Chairman. Our last item is a resolution authorizing settlement of pending litigation, Penny Bangber et al. Versus the Winnebago County Sheriffs et al. On the amount of $2,250,000. And I so move.
Moved by Mr. Salgado. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gurl. Any discussion from board members? Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this motion to approve? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present.
And that concludes our report.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. The next is the Zoning Committee. Mr. Webster.
Okay, thank you. Your zoning committee has one item on the agenda tonight, and this is to be voted on, and this was read in prior for the record. It's SU 0122. That's a special use permit for the wedding and reception facility, and this one came before you with no less than 30 conditions, so I think it's fair to say that all the bases have been covered. So this comes before you with conditions, and I move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Webster, second by Mr. Sweeney. Any discussion, Mr. Webster, from the chair?
No, I'd just like to say this, is that these wedding venues, now we've had a number of them pop up in the county here the last couple of years, and I got a call, interestingly enough, just earlier this week from a woman called, and she wanted to know how to go about getting the special use permit for another wedding venue. So for some reason, we in Winnebago County have become somewhat of a mecca for getting married in a farm. I have no issues with those. So good for us. It brings a little bit of economic development without us participating monetarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Is there any board member discussion on this item? All right, hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this motion to approve? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Webster?
Yeah, thank you. That's all we have this evening.
Thank you. We'll move on to Economic Development Committee. Mr. Westcott.
Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening.
Tonight we have two reports, a resolution accepting a grant from the Illinois Housing Development Authority Strong Communities Program. And the second one is a resolution granting authority to the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute the documents necessary to complete a loan for $100,000 from the revolving loan fund to the Northern Lights Bryant LLC, doing business as Northern Lights. I so move.
Are you grouping both of those together, Mr. Westcott?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is to approve item number 2 and 3 under Economic Development. We have a motion by Mr. Westcott, a second by Mr. Tassoni. Is there any discussion on your part, Mr. Westcott? No?
That's it for
Okay, any board member discussion on these two items? All right, hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to either of these items? Very good. Clerk, please cast a yes for all members present for both items.
Yes, and we'll be having a Economic Development Committee meeting on Monday, April 18th at 5:30 p.m.
Very good.
And the mic count.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Operations and Administrative Committee. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Operations has got one resolution this evening. It's a resolution awarding joint seal coating services, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald and second by Mrs. Red. Any discussion, Mr. McDonald, from your... Nope. Any board member discussion on this item? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? All right, hearing none, please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
That concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. The Public Works Committee, Mr. Dave Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. No report this evening. Our next scheduled meeting will be Tuesday, April 19th.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Move on to Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, Mr. Gurl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report.
Thank you, Mr. Gurl. We've already had unfinished business from the Zoning Committee. We'll move on to new business. Is there any new business in front of the County Board this evening? Mr. Webster?
Yeah, maybe it could wait to the end of the meeting. I do have a question.
Oh, very good. Okay, number 12 is announcements and communications. Clerk Gamal.
Thank you, Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence. Also, just a reminder, all those happy couples wanting to get married in one of those married barns needs to get a license first.
I'll remind you.
Leave it to Lori.
Very good, Clerk Gamal.
Smile.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome. Is there any board member announcements this evening? Yes, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A week from tomorrow is the Rockford Area Music Industry Awards. Are you familiar with the Rammies? I'm sure a number are. It's going to be taking place at the Bella Shrine Center over on Newburgh. I'm sure most of you know where it's located at, but if you could make the attendance, it would be fantastic. It's going to be a wonderful time. I'll be co-hosting along with Double T from 96.7 The Eagle. So we're going to be passing out awards voted by Rammy members, and we're going to have live music, live bands such as That Girl, Minimal. I'm sure some of you are familiar with those two bands, along with about 6 or 7 other bands. So there'll be a number of different categories where there'll be sound sound engineer, female vocalist of the year, male vocalist, you name it. It's going to be a fun time. Food will be available. So once again, that's next week, a week from tomorrow. So if you could just sort of keep that in your mind and want to come out and have a good time and dance the night away by meeting some local musicians, supporting local music, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. Recently, we got an email from the IT department from Mr. Dan Majors there, and I just got a question for him. If he could follow up with a little bit of an explanation about us getting our email addresses changed.
For sure. Mr. Majors?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so the email went out, and what we're doing is we're changing over from a wincoil.us to a wincoil.gov. The reasons for that are numerous. One, it gives us some better security options. Two, there are some statutory requirements for some of our departments that are required to now have a .gov address. And three, it helps us to better comply with FOIA requests. And four, it's kind of just the ongoing trend. You'll see more and more of these requirements coming along. So now is the good time to kind of move all of our departments along that way. So everyone who has a wincoil.us address, we've been working with those department heads and coming up. Typically the format is, departmentname.wincoil.gov. And we started rolling those out this week. So several of you have changed. The things that you all will need to be aware of is you can start giving out your new email address. The board ones have been changed as of this time. The wincoil.us addresses will be active until the end of 2022. That's the tentative date. We've gone with that. If there's some reasons we need to extend some of those, we can do that on a one-by-one basis. If there's any further questions, please let me know.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Redd.
Thank you, Chairman. I attended a meeting at West Gateway Coalition last Wednesday, and they asked that I tell the county board thank you and the health department for the gifts that they handed out that they gave to them. They will be handing out care bags on Saturday in the community.
Thank you, Mrs. Redd. Any other board member announcements or communications? All right, I see in the audience Reverend Dotson is here, Earl Dotson Sr. I know he's missed his part of the agenda, but I'm going to allow him to come up since he came here and took the time to speak. Reverend, if you want to come forward, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Three times. Yeah, I thought Chris was going to win.
Comes late, he still can be taken down.
There goes Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. I was having a conversation with Mr. Putin from Russia. He sends you all greetings. That's not very good humor. The Bible. Most of the crowd spread their garments on the road. Others cut branches and spread them on the road. Crowds went before him, and those that followed him shouted, "Hosanna!" And all the city was stirred, saying, "Who is this?" Later saying, "Crucify him." Oh, the blindness, fickleness, instability of human loyalty and its horrific consequences. The President and Vice President and Congress of the United States say we must have a laser focus on manufacturing, especially on computer chips. Semiconductor supply chain suppliers, we need to be focused on that. In an unusual show of bipartisanship, the Senate passed the United States Innovation Competitive Act, with 18 Republicans voting with 50 Democrats for this important legislation, saying to our global competitors, especially China, that we will soon be on par or leading again in manufacturing. We yielded this important leadership to save money. How short-sighted and costly. Laser focus, especially again on computer chips and medicine, the latter we buy in large quantities from our avowed enemy, Communist China. The Chips for America Fund is an integral part of this legislation, providing $52 billion for this initiative, as semiconductors devices are essential in today's digital economy, operating most cars and all computers. Manufacturing and selling of these devices are dependent upon a strong, dependable supply chain, as are other important goods, which makes the United States dangerously dependent on foreign manufacturers, negatively impacting our national security, causing inflation and billions of dollars in economic activity. Also, enriching Communist China, who is aiding a madman in Russia who is threatening the world with a nuclear holocaust. The House passed the American Competition Act, providing an inclusive vision for technology and manufacturing competitiveness. This will greatly aid disinvested communities like Westside Rockford, providing highly skilled and highly paid jobs in advanced manufacturing, paying in the $70,000 to $120,000 range without a college degree.
Crazy.
Yet, here in the city of Rockford, led, or I should say misled, which is more accurately, is considering turning church school that we once owned and seek to reacquire into a senior citizens facility in an area that was abandoned by a United States Army garrison of soldiers because of break-ins, thefts, car vandalized behind a barbed wire enclosure. The facility, if built, would house the most vulnerable citizens, mostly black, in a high-crime area, only 3 blocks from church school, as opposed
Reverend
to
Dotson, your time is up.
My time is up?
Yeah, you're 3 minutes. You're about
Well, thank you
3.5
very much
minutes
again.
now.
I'll tell Putin you all said hello.
Thank you, Reverend Dotson.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I want to wish everybody a blessed Easter weekend and a safe Easter weekend. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder that our next board meeting is April 28th, and we will be back in the county board chambers. Just as a reminder, I'd like to thank Scott Lewandowski for hosting us the last 2 board meetings. Appreciate all your help, Scott, in getting the room set up like this and the sound system. You're great, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah.
All right, do we have a motion to dismiss? Mr. Webster's quick on that draw. Motion to adjourn, second by Ms. Gorel.
Sorry, who was first?
Mr. Webster.
Webster
And second by Ms. Gorel. All in favor of the adjournment, say aye. 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 We are adjourned. Thank you.